Okay, okay, dear friends. Welcome this morning. And as explained as well in your program book, this day is very particular, dedicated to the real and harsh world of our work as artists. So we have several lectures, there will be live interviews, and we continue that tomorrow morning. After that we have all the workshops. So we start this morning with our old friend of the house, or how should I pronounce this? Say this, Geoffrey Stevenson, and he is a lecturer at the University of Edinburgh, and he voted against leaving Europe, so because Scotland likes to be part of the EU. So I think they still have to do some debates over there in the United Kingdom. Maybe after a few years it is not a United Kingdom anymore, but England, Scotland and Wales, and who knows. You know, there are so many tensions in that nation, and if I read what is happening there, especially what some politicians say, then you really think, are they losing their senses? So I'm happy I'm not living in England, but I'm living in Holland, and I'm thankful for that. But here we have as well those strong populist votes, and that will not help you either. But we are not now in a political discussion, but at a discussion about the reality of the arts. Well, Geoffrey, welcome with us again. Let me remember, the first time you were with us, was that in 82 or 83? 82. Well, almost from the beginning. Wow. Well, that's a precious asset we have. Okay. Give Geoffrey a big hand.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you for that introduction, Lane, and for the political context. I didn't have a vote, being an American. But I would have been against it. I'm delighted to have the privilege and the honor of speaking to the 2018 CA. Of course, I realize that in mime, mime is the art form, which I was known for here for many years. In mime, I might be more eloquent. I used to say that I took up mime because I found I was better off on stage when I kept my mouth shut. But I have come to see since that maybe there is a place for words, just occasionally. And of course, words are what Asa expects. Is that not true? Start again. A couple of quotes to get us started. From 2 Corinthians 4, verse 7, "But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us." And the other quote I want to bring to you to start us off is from that poet, songwriter Leonard Cohen. "There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." In the first section this morning, we're going to be considering further ways of preparing yourself for the future of work in the culture, arts sectors. And we're going to do this in my session through the frame or the lens of vulnerability. Well, you'll say to me, vulnerability? That's a very strange framing device, unless you're going to tell us how to avoid being vulnerable. Because being vulnerable means getting hurt, right? And most of us can do without getting hurt. I mean, just being interested in the arts and in creativity has made us vulnerable, right? For example, I can think of disdain from schoolmates who wondered why we weren't more interested in being popular, or being pretty, or being sporty, or being competitive. I can imagine that a creative streak in you has probably brought criticism or concern from teachers. They may have felt that exploring non-academic topics in an independent fashion was distracting you from the important knowledge cramming and employee preparation process that they thought was their job. Well, when our older son, Geoffrey John, when he was 16, he was getting good grades and good marks, especially in the science and maths subjects. So the school encouraged him to apply for Cambridge University to read natural science. Coming up to his final year, the headmaster, he took him aside and he said if he was really serious about getting in, he should give up his art course. I mean, he loved his painting and his drawing. It meant a lot to him. He said he should give this up and take an extra advanced level maths course. Well, our son, I'm proud of him, he politely but flatly refused. And he got into Cambridge anyway. But going for work in the creative sector may also have dismayed your parents. They naturally want security and prosperity for their children. And what kind of stable home environment can an artist possibly produce for the grandchildren that they secretly or not so secretly want you to have? And that's before you even get to the quest for an agent, a publisher, a gallery, the breakthrough stage part or dance role, endless auditions where humiliations and setbacks are appalling. So you can say to me, I'm sure, thanks very much. We're not sure that vulnerability sounds very appealing this morning. But hear me out. There are 3 areas in the life of the artist, in the creative life, where I'd like to discuss this with you. And this is very much a discussion. I hope I don't sound too much like a preacher, but instead a fellow traveler on the road. And there will be time for comments and questions, and I would be happy, I really would, to clarify or to explain anything while I'm going along. Just raise a hand, okay? Okay? So the 3 areas are lifelong learning and professional development through stages of life and with mentors, and then communities of practice and the support of peers, and finally artistic collaboration and working in fusion and cross-discipline experimentation. But first of all, let me explain what I mean by being vulnerable. Vulnerable. Like vulnerable can't pronounce his words. Dr. Brené Brown is a researcher. She's a storyteller and a researcher at the University of Houston, the Graduate College of Social Work in Dallas. In Houston, and she's a Christian, and since about 2009, she's become well known for research on such subjects as vulnerability, courage, worthiness, and shame. One of her internet TED Talks on the power of vulnerability is in the top 25 TED Talk playlist with 39 million viewings when I last looked. Now, her work on shame is particularly interesting. It's not where she started out. She was originally looking for factors that contributed or correlated with people who seemed to live life wholeheartedly. She wrote a book, Becoming Wholehearted, The Power of Vulnerability. And put very briefly, she found in numerous interviews with people from a whole range of professions, different ages, that being vulnerable was absolutely key to living and loving and leading and parenting in the most positive and creative and successful ways. Far from being constantly crippled, the vulnerable person was open to connecting with others in a range of relationships. One of her key quotes, "Vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change." However, she found in her research hundreds of interviews that what closed people off, what shut people down, what limited or halted creativity and love and capable leadership, something that connected with vulnerability, but it's shame. Shame. Now, shame is not the same as guilt. She differentiates. Guilt is a reaction to something we know we have done wrong. We've not lived up to the standards that we know are right and good and true. Shame is at its root social. it derives fundamentally from the fear of being disconnected. The fear of being disconnected. A lot of recent psychological research tells us we're virtually hardwired. We're neurobiologically set up to make connections, to be in community, to look out for each other. And shame is the threat of being excluded, of being exiled, cast out. When shame is experienced, it's visceral, isn't it? You feel it down here. In a world around us, shame can be triggered by the fear of not being smart enough, not being thin enough, not being successful enough, not being confident enough. Shame is online as well, of course, not having enough likes on Bookface or Instaboast, but also in numerous subtle and overt ways in which shaming and insults and criticism are used to drag someone down. In Daring Greatly, she tells the story of the email sent by mistake. Anyone done that? Yeah, Brené had turned down a speaking invitation. She turned it down in good time for very good reasons, but the organizer had been berating her for being in emails and had been quite rude to her. And she was forwarding one of these painful emails to her husband, right? And she was complaining about him in very explicit language. She writes, "And I will neither confirm nor deny that the word horseshit was used." Twice. But then, by mistake, she pressed reply rather than forward. And just as her MacBook made its whoosh, sending mail sound, she screamed, "No!" But it was too late. Within an hour, she had a reply back. "I knew it. You are a horrible person. You are not wholehearted," etc., etc. Shame had already kicked in for her, bringing waves of despair and resurrecting old fears, heavily masked, which for her were fears of being seen for who she really is or really was. Now, her strategies for handling this, including first and foremost, sharing and talking it through with her husband and a close friend. These two gave her what she most needed: empathy. Not advice, not justifications, but empathy. So eventually she wrote back to this man. She owned her own part in inappropriate exchanges. She suggested some boundaries and never heard from him again. But most of us, I think, will recognize that sense of failure and humiliation when we fall short of the standards that we set ourselves in one area or another in order to avoid shame. Now, Brown thinks that shame is inevitable in a connected life. It's inevitable in a connected life. It's always going to happen. For some of us, more than others, in our personalities, but it's always going to happen. It's impossible to defend against unless you're completely cut off from others and from society. We are all at seriously deep levels in our personalities driven by the fear of shame. And the aim is to have strategies and insights to help you become not shame-proof, but shame-resilient. Shame-resilient. And so one of our important key principles is that if we can share our story with someone who responds with empathy and understanding, shame can't survive. Well, I wanted to go through that material on shame because I think it sets the context for how we're going to accept and use being vulnerable as an artist. We need to do our inner work. We need to recognize shame for what it is and how it operates. We need to become or begin to become shame resilient. We need to develop strategies for navigating through those crippling times, and they can be crippling. Otherwise, shame will cause us to shut down and close off and put on masks and build up our defenses. So to summarize, vulnerability is key. It's crucial. It's a necessary condition for being connected. Shame is an inevitable experience that arises from the primal fear of being disconnected. having strategies and understanding to become resilient to shame events. They keep us from closing down. They enable us to continue to be vulnerable. But why is vulnerability good? Well, let me explain that for each of our 3 areas. So I want to talk about lifelong learning, easy to assent to, difficult in practice. Let me just stop and do we have a roving mic for this session? One of these. I just stop and ask if there are any questions or observations or stories that you'd like to share on that. Shall I carry on? Lifelong learning, easy to assent to, difficult in practice. After the struggle and the dedication of years of hard training, and that training can be exceptionally brutal in classical disciplines such as ballet and music, achieving a modest degree of success can lead, can it not, to an attitude that, hey guys, it's payback time. A sense of entitlement if I get any success. At last I'm being rewarded for all that hard work. And there can be, I think, a temptation to think that, well, when I've sold these paintings, when I've toured this show, when I've recorded this album, I'll pray and I'll hope for creativity and inspiration I need to do the next one. And if I'm any good, it'll come, right? After all, it's hard enough. You want me to go back to school? No, I'm not saying that, but take a look at these images. The rooster or cock. Guadeloupe, France. Woman reading, writing. Composition with butterfly. The crucifixion. These 6 images have 2 things in common. Can anyone tell me what they are? No? Christian content, well, arguably. They're all by the same artist. Who is it? Pablo Picasso. And they're all from the same year, 1932. He did all of those and many, many other works in 1932. Now, Picasso in 1932 was about halfway through his creative career. He was prolific, not to say extremely restless. In 1932, he had achieved success. He could buy a chateau in the countryside in which to work, as well as a second apartment in Paris above where he lived for a studio. He had a prestigious show coming up, a retrospective, which is almost unheard of for a living artist. And work for this was pouring out of him all year. Now, the exhibition was judged a considerable success. However, on the last day, a very critical review came out written by the psychoanalyst Carl Jung, in which he suggested that Picasso's wildly varying styles and output was evidence of schizophrenia. Well, not for me to dispute the doctor's diagnosis, but my view is that it's evidence of a desire to go on learning and a willingness to accept the vulnerability that goes with that. The challenge, of course, to remaining vulnerable and open faces the young artist who is out of basic classroom training or studio plus instructor type training. And when you finish the course and there's no more money to attend classes all day and go drinking all night, the chief challenge many young artists face is how to continue to develop their technique, how to continue to put in the hours of practice to move towards mastery of their art form, finding dance classes, studio space, clay or paint or canvases, time to run endlessly up and down scales and arpeggios. These are real challenges. It's a basic problem for every aspiring artist, and the solutions are seldom handed to you on a silver platter. All artists need to make room for learning, give it space, make room for it. Expect it to happen in the likely and unlikely places, in the coffee shop as well as in the studio or the classroom, in the untidy and stressful chaos of the city as well as on the mountaintop or by the peaceful riverside. Learn with friends, learn with colleagues, with masters of the art form, as well as with students coming to learn from you. Go on learning. I spoke of this issue a couple of years ago here, and one of the solutions I proposed was to pay attention to the huge value of the mentor. No doubt difficult to find, but the value of the mentor. The term mentor has been used in many, many different ways, but usually with the connotations of the more experienced, practiced, and or wiser person helping the newcomer or the neophyte in ways that will develop them and help them on their journey to similar mastery. You can choose the form of mentor you like. The original mentor was taken to be a Greek character described by Homer as a wise and trusted counselor. The idea of a mentor as an aid, an adjunct to learning, draws on extensive scholarly literature. But it also goes beyond that to an archetypal significance in human learning experience. It goes beyond affirming the student's goals and ambition. It goes beyond helping with their call and vocation. Those are fundamental, but it goes beyond that. It's traditional, a relationship of shaping and influencing the student through the task or during a particular developmental period facing the student. Mentors can be of incalculable benefit, not just as trainers or coaches working with the student on technique, but as role models, as guiding lights, inspiring and encouraging and building confidence, ready to challenge, but sometimes there to comfort, inducting the student or the mentee into the ethos, into the structure, the values of successful professionals in that art form. There's an excellent research paper by Peter Renshaw, Lifelong Learning for Musicians, and he distilled a huge amount of work done on mentoring and coaching in the business world and applied it to the development of mentors for musicians. And he wrote, mentoring has a longer-term focus designed to foster personal growth, to help an individual place their artistic, personal, professional development in a wider cultural, social, and educational context. So, why am I doing what I do? How do I perceive my musical identity? In what ways does this impact on my professional life and work? Where am I going? What determines my long-term goals? Anybody here, at KSI, I think we were 2 years ago, who heard me talk about mentors back then? And I was just wondering if there's anyone who can talk about a mentor relationship that they've formed or strengthened since then. Did anybody have an experience of a mentor at present who's really helping you? Anybody like to share or say a word about a particularly useful mentor, or maybe you're mentoring someone else and you can point to something going on in their life? It's early in the morning. I've got one though.
2 years ago, I after also the CA and all the thinking about mentoring, I tried to find a group in my city or nearby where I could join in printmaking, as that is what I want to grow in. So I found a group, and the average age dropped when I joined, and it's beautiful because these are all grandparents almost, all of them. But I learned so much from them, and not only in printmaking, but also in life, what they've experienced in their lives, and it's beautiful to be a part of that.
Oh, that's great. That's good to hear. Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah. Paul.
Right. My name is Paul Lorenger. I'm not actually talking about my art form, but I'm talking about life in general. And I have long resisted this concept of mentoring because it seemed like it was some big thing that you could not, it was some institutional idea or some concept that you had to submit to. But I think it's as you're saying, Geoffrey, it's bigger than one specific relationship or one sort of specific kind of relationship that only takes one track. So for me, I helped a guy come from Eastern Europe and get going in his career in the West, not in an artistic career, but he got started financially, and I'm still sort of giving input into his life. And strangely enough, he told me, you know, Paul, you know, the age you are and you've been a Christian so long, you should be someone's mentor. And so I think I've tricked him. I've become sort of like a mentor, but doing it sort of like from a brother, an older brother level. And what I've been learning lately is that the mentoring concept is not just about one person doing everything for another person, but that it's you can have mentors in a number of different fields and a number of different levels, and give input to each other. So that's what I've learned.
That's great. Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Susanna. Stand up.
Yes. I'm Susanna Schmidt. We are singing with my husband in two choirs where we live in Germany, and both of the choirs are very high quality. That means that, for example, this year we were singing Puccini Messa di Gloria, or we were singing Joan Passion from Bach. So that and that means we have two conductors, two conductors, yes. And one is not close to me, the other is very close to me. It means I don't call it mentor because it's on my side a very personal contact, because I can because his messages are very important for my development, for my singing, and he has very good ears. We are about 60 in the choir, but he is able to give personal messages to your voice. How do you your quality? How you have to develop your quality, and it's quite amazing. I call him a master. I didn't have too many masters, and you don't have too many masters in your life, but I have now one. I didn't look for it. I'm quite old, so I didn't look for a master, but I have got one, and it is fantastic to read this person, because he's perfect in music theory. He's perfect in music history, and he's funny, and so we don't like to pass any minute of his rehearsals because it's fantastic.
Great story. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing for sharing those. One of the benefits of the mentor, who is more than just a technique coach, is the modeling of attitudes and virtues. If your mentor insists on being the unquestioned authority, who's apparently never made a mistake, well, that may end up reinforcing in you the value of a protective shell or a mask. Beware. But if they are approachable and empathetic to the struggles you're facing, well, the chances are you'll be strengthened in ways that will allow you to be vulnerable and to embrace the changes of lifelong learning. Now, secondly, I'd like us to consider how vulnerability can enhance communities of practice. I want to say that vulnerability is a prerequisite for building up strong and beneficial communities of practice, which, of course, is a CA buzz term from the last few years, communities of practice. It refers to the supportive gathering of peers who have enough in common to share their journeys with empathy and vulnerability. One of the most intense experience of our artistic community in my life arose during a student production of Chekhov's The Seagull at university. And early in the rehearsal period, the 10 or 12 of us went for the weekend to a house in the country, and where we spent time not just learning our lines and blocking our moves, but doing trust exercises and having hilarious meals together. And so by the time we finished our rehearsals and came to the opening night of a very short run, we were incredibly close to one another. Or so we felt. This was the early 1970s, you must understand. And when the run finished, we hugged and we wept. We were having such fun and had bonded so closely that whether the show was good or not, whether we had succeeded or failed, the prospect of failure and shame was diminished to almost nothing. To the translators going to the top of page 7, equally important is being open to learning in all the many interactions and professional and social relationships with fellow travelers on the artist's road. And peer learning through collaboration flowers naturally in some professions, such as jazz musicianship, but it's more unusual in art forms demanding long periods of solo work. Peer learning is tricky to enable, right? It's tricky to make work at structural levels, apart from short-term conferences and residencies, but it carries the potential for great rewards. The development of stronger technique, more expansive invention and creativity, as well as confidence building and rekindling creative fires. Not as easy as it sounds. Nor should we underestimate the kinds of tensions and professional jealousies that can exist. One story told about Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres is that when he passed by a painting by Eugène Delacroix, his great rival, ideological opposite, he would cover his eyes and he would say, "I've no need to know how not to do it." But artists need not pull each other down, certainly not when there is when they are not in competition for the same resources and grants and commissions. But maybe I'm being idealistic. The challenges for practitioners in CA who may not be working in elite environments, the challenge for them is to find the collectives, to find the gatherings, the communities that will nourish and provoke and stimulate them in the same kinds of ways. I cannot really see us recreating the guilds or medieval guilds or the organizations or that used to obtain with elaborate and restrictive membership structures. As I said 2 years ago, there are two threads running through the 37 years of CA seminars that I've attended. Two threads, one of silver and one of gold. I would say that the golden thread is Solo Dei Gloria, art practiced for the glory of God. And the silver thread is one of community. Year after year, artists turn up here, willing to perform and to teach without payment, for the sheer privilege and the pleasure and the excitement and the encouragement of hanging out with other artists, of talking, laughing, crying, drinking, praying together, and sharing things that the nice people of my own home church don't understand. But I hear you say we only meet for 5 or 6 days out of the year. What about the rest of the year? Well, Lane and others have produced many initiatives and experiments over the years in addition to this annual gathering. It has to be said that some associations and networks that may have worked for a time in the in the last century, in the 80s or 90s, would not be appropriate for the social conditions now, for the economic, the cultural conditions now. But the explosive rise of the internet, social networking, video, MP3, image sharing and distribution, they open the way, do they not, for new forms of virtual gatherings and distributed communities. What kind of answer are communities of practice? Well, a lot depends on proposing and developing the right kinds of structure. Neither too loose, not too restrictive, and it depends on funding, because websites and gatherings and publications, collaborations, they all cost money, and it depends on commitment. Any community of peers requires as much giving as receiving. It requires members who are in for the long haul, not just logging on when they occasionally feel like contributing. It requires also competing visions that are in creative tension to enable organic growth. Some solutions that are top-down, that are heavily funded, they may not be as significant or as useful or even as possible as pop-up communities driven by individuals with vision who are answering a felt need at a particular time and place. I will say again, though, that in that process, vulnerability and empathy are the key to connectedness, and whether that's online or face-to-face in real time. So finally, I want to look at somewhere along here, collaboration and experimentation. While I just treat you to some memories from CA. Vulnerability is essential in the area of collaboration and working together across different art forms and across other divides, whether they're social divides, political, gender, or cultural. The trouble is that sometimes that years of training and development have gone into developing a talent. And along with that can come some fairly rigid ideas of how things should be done. The perfect pirouette fouettée that must flow from the dancer without hesitation or apparent effort and be completely in the service of the choreography. It's not achieved without a clear sense, a very clear sense of right and wrong. This is how it's done. This is how it's not done. This is when it's done. This is where it's appropriate. And now you're telling me some jumped up actor or painter or poet comes along and wants the dancer to convey an emotion with it or slow it down or break it up. And suddenly the whole project that seemed like such a good idea when we all applied for funding is going to be the ruin of your career. And that's the best case scenario. Well, I have a positive story, though. I remember a big collaborative project. Nearly 20 of us gathered for 10 days in Ravensburg, Germany in the 90s. And the devised show was called Flying Mammals. And it was based on the book of Ecclesiastes and David Byrne's album, The Forest, as a soundtrack. And it incorporated dance and mime and music and spoken word and was directed and produced by Gerald Anderson and Paul Lorenger, who I was delighted to meet again last night after many, many years. I was the only mime I seem to recall. And I remember I spent a lot of time in rehearsal working on improvised choreography with a contemporary dancer from New York. Now, of course, as a mime, as a solo mime, I'm used to having the stage to myself, right? I established clear mimetic communication with my audience. So could we, and this dancer and this mime, find a common movement language? Could we? Heck. I thought I was going to collapse from the strain. In the end, we were both subservient to the larger piece, which was eventually performed in a civic auditorium with the town's officials and arts enthusiasts in attendance. But I'm asking, well, what if I fail? Well, what if I don't keep up my side? What if I look less professional than the others? What if no one pays any attention to my ideas? Well, these are familiar fears and insecurities, and they are ones that bedevil many a young and inexperienced artist. But I just had to tell myself that our job as artists is... oh, by the way, we got a slide for the whole topic here, collaboration and fusion projects. And the 3 tasks is, 1, goes without saying, we work as hard as possible, right? 2, recognize that our aim is not to succeed, but to fail in interesting ways. Our aim is not always to succeed, but to fail in interesting ways. And 3, to remain open. And this third and most important principle goes back to the vulnerability and connections. I mean, what I think I lacked early in my career, and being a solo artist didn't help, perhaps it played into my own weaknesses. What I lacked was an ability to open myself to others in the rehearsal room. Sure, I could do a form of openness and vulnerability in front of an audience, but taking the mask off in front of other colleagues, well, that was something that I found much more difficult. Now, where have I broken down and found comfort and empathy? Where have I held in my arms and cried with another broken artist? Here at CA. It's a beautiful place. So I want to finish by saying that vulnerability isn't something that can be turned on and off like a smile. It's more like a virtuous habit that develops with practice. It's not the same as oversharing. It's not the same as dominating others with the rawness of your inner life. Be careful of using your deep sharing to manipulate others. But remember that vulnerability is not an end in itself. It's a condition. It's a condition that's necessary for being loved and for being looked after and for loving and looking after others. So my friends, get connected. Stay connected. Get real. Stay real. Be trusting. Stay trusting. There will be pain. There will be pain. But you know, pain, like joy, is something that we're made to handle together. God bless you. Leave you with my 2 quotes about weakness and brokenness. Thank you very much.
We have 15 minutes for questions to Geoffrey. Where is Asia, Richard?
Yeah, right here.
Oh, good, good. You will run around. So.
Right, okay. If there's anyone who wants to ask some questions or wants to add something,
Raise your
now
hands.
is the chance. Now is the time. Just give me a quick hand sign and I'll come to you. Hand you the mic.
The lecture must have raised questions about your personal vulnerability, huh? At least with me, but oh yeah. Yeah. There.
Yes, I'll come to you. I'll just hold it for you, right?
It's just a thought I've been carrying around about shame and about vulnerability. When Adam and Eve shamed themselves and noticed they were naked and felt ashamed, all they had were just some fig leaves to cover their shame. And God didn't go up to them and said, shame on you. And what he did, he gave them furs, warm clothes to hold them. And I think that's a beautiful picture for how to handle my shame, that I only have fig leaves, but God covers me in furs and keeps me warm and holds me.
Wow. Yes. Next question or thing?
So I'm currently reading the Daring Greatly book by Brené Brown, and she's saying that she's now only sharing stories on stage with which she said she has completely abgeschlossen. So she's done dealing with it, and it's not stories that are very current stories in her life anymore. So because she made difficult experiences with sharing a story that, for example, say she has a big fight with her husband, like yesterday, and it has been, she has still been struggling with it. She's not sharing stories like that anymore. And I'm wondering, as an artist, what do you think is a healthy way to say, I'm ready to share these stories on stage or through my art? Because for me as a songwriter, I know there are often times where I would play songs that are really new, that are probably about a topic that is very current and very deep within my everyday life. And I'm wondering, is that okay for myself and for the audience to share that? And at what point does that not have anything to do with vulnerability anymore, but with oversharing, as Brené Brown is writing?
Thank you very much. That's a really good question, a really important question as well. In my own art form of mime, it's not something that I think I faced very much, but I can see in the many artists, particularly songwriters, either disguising or maybe not disguising at all their the struggles that they have. I have a friend who's a playwright, and he wrote a play in which the two characters seemed terribly similar to himself and his ex-wife when they were struggling together, and we were kind of covering our eyes. It just seemed too raw and out there to have this performed at the in the Edinburgh Festival Fringe. There are great dangers there on all sorts of levels, and I'd love to hear from anyone else who has some experience there on how you avoid oversharing at the wrong time. I would say though that what is churning in you is valuable fire for creativity, but when you haven't done the inner work to understand some of what's happening, that's where the dangers start coming.
Ah, daar.
Still on? Testing. Yes.
Thank you. I don't have a complete answer to that question about when something's ready, but I am mindful of what I heard about forgiveness a couple years ago, which is that how you know if you've actually forgiven someone is that the negative stimulus can come up. You see them, or you hear from them, or something reminds you of them, and it doesn't hurt you like it used to. So I'm not saying that that's a one-step thing, but I'm saying that if it still hurts you as much as it did, you're not ready.
yeah, wise, I think.
Yes, I see one over there, right? So, I'll just...
Thank you. I would like to ask you, Geoffrey, what did you mean exactly by saying that avoid deep sharings to manipulate the people? Maybe that I feel something about it because sometimes I feel that experiencing even here, you know, that yes, that was enough. I don't want to hear more, but could you explain it somehow more, because I would like to understand what my instinct says, or what is that? Could you explain it?
That was an observation I threw in at almost in passing at the end, but it is something that can occur can it not in vulnerable situations, and you do find in individuals who almost take a glory in parading their woundedness and end up dominating a group. I think this can happen in 12-step and many other peer situations. So I just wanted to flag it really, and not say that opening absolutely everything I have to everybody I meet is a good thing. That was all. I'm not trained in the psychodynamics that would really allow me to give a good answer on that.
I was just going to say that Stephen King, the writer, says that when you become a writer, your days as a member of polite society are at an end. So those of us who are writers, we begin to realize that an awful lot goes on the page, and sometimes it has interesting results.
Yeah, there's that other saying about writing. Was it attributed to a sports writer? How do you become a writer? Sit down at a typewriter and open a vein. At the back.
There's another question here at the back. I'll come to you.
Bonjour tout le monde, je suis le petit français là.
Elvira, can you stand with him and translate it in English?
Yeah, okay. I have the impression we've got two different kinds of vulnerability. One that's secret, that's our own, and one that's public, some vulnerability that we show to the others. And the one that we fear, well, the thing that we fear is our public vulnerability. Especially for us, the artists. I don't think it's necessary to show our secret, our private vulnerability to the world. But we have to know what our public vulnerability is, and to recognize that we have also weaknesses in the technical field. Because that vulnerability will make us become better and improve ourselves. Improve our art. But our secret vulnerability is our private struggle. Mm-hmm. And our public vulnerability is a struggle with the others.
Thank you very much. I agree with that. I think they're wise words. Very, very. Yes, thank you.
Right. I've seen that, and I'll come to you. Morning exercise for me there. Right. Okay, I'll hold it.
Jesus says, among a lot of other things, of course, he says, do not cast your pearls before the swine, so that they do not turn around and trample you. I hope I translated it well in the English version. And I have the feeling this may also shed some light on this topic. The pearls are, in this case, I would think, what is really inside you, your own most valuable things that you have inside you, which are, of course, very vulnerable. And I think Jesus is telling us that we should really look at ourselves, why we share these vulnerable things with others. Is it because we really want to reach out and to make a connection and find a oneness in which there is healing that we can find together in our shared vulnerability? Or do we do it to show people how special we are, you know, our pearls, you know? And I think that's maybe a criterion to really keep your eye on to make sure that you do not are not vulnerable in the wrong way at the wrong time.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's a good insight. Very good insight as well. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yes, I've seen another hand there.
I have a question to you. Isn't pain and struggle the power that an artist needs that he can work? For instance, I know many writers from the former GDR. They wrote their best books under pressure of the dictatorship. And when they came to West Germany, or after 1989, there was nothing else. They didn't have to struggle, and they didn't write any good books anymore. So isn't pain and struggle and inner struggle the source of creation, creativeness?
It seems to be a very common trope, a very widely held perception, and I think there is a lot in it. Certain kinds of work come out of that. Other kinds of work come from a highly trained classical disposition that may not may be distracted by too much inner turmoil or too much external social unrest. But I think that's the debate to continue to have on what kinds of internal struggle and unrest, what sort of fire produces the best work, or produces the right work for the right time in the right place. So I'm going to say yes and no.
Yes? Okay. I'll hold it for you.
Thank you. I just want to add on the vulnerability that he said with regards to throwing your pills for the swines.
Yeah.
I think vulnerability should be a choice, but handled with wisdom. And vulnerability is not to have a motive. When vulnerability has a motive, it's not vulnerability at all, because it's not pure. And I also want to touch on the subject that you spoke about, and being vulnerable, open yourself, oversharing, and, showing your openness of heart to others, in showing how special you are. I think the man over there said that. And I think, that's actually having vulnerability with a motive. And that's not vulnerability at all, if you have a motive with your vulnerability, because it is special. And the word explains it in that sense, what vulnerability is. I just wanted to add that.
Yes, well said, very well put. Thank you. Thank you.
There's another one. Okay. You again. Just a sec.
Might be that it is a psychological question, and just I used to think before that was new for me, that you said that against vulnerability, you say shame would be, because I used to think fears are the first. So my question would be, shame is our first bad impression or fears? Because I thought everything is rooting in our fears. Fears from shame, fears from but you put shame in to the first place. Could you explain that?
The psychologist Abraham Maslow talked about a hierarchy of needs that are being met, and physical needs, and the idea that we may not have a bed for the night, we may not have food for our stomach, we may not have warmth. Are pretty basic. A lot of fears result from an anxiety there, but this idea of fear of being disconnected from one another seemed to be and was presented in Brené Brown's work as being related to this concept of shame, and therefore very, very fundamental. Wouldn't argue with that it's the most fundamental, but that fear of being disconnected from one another. And the fact that some of us have built up our lives, sometimes over decades, finding masks and ways of making sure that we don't feel that, we sometimes become very subtle players, and we don't seem to show the fear, such as the skill and the complexity of the masks that we have constructed. So I think there's no there's always important work to do, but in the right time and in the right place to address that question of shame.
Okay. Maybe I add something. To be vulnerable, there is a link to authenticity. And what people really need today, if you are a performer, that you are authentic. And especially a decade ago, we all have seen, especially in Christian circles, so many covers of Amy Grant's and Sandy Patty's and Michael W. Smith and all the other ones from America, that it became hilarious. I mean, if you had seen that performer, you had seen them all. So it's a cry for renewal as well in your art form. Authentic, something new. But when you do that, then it's as well very sensitive. And if you do that on stage, then I've seen happening that after the show, somebody from the audience comes to such an artist and says, well, I liked it, but, you know, and then comes some negative comment. And there you are, and, you know, you implode. So you, beside being vulnerable, you have as well to defend yourself against all those typical critiques that are useless. Yeah? Or same with speaker, you speak somewhere, and then afterwards somebody comes to you, Mr. Leenlaarder, I liked your teaching, but, you know, and then whoop, the whole thing comes. I will never forget, Rie and I, we have been doing many innovating ideas through the years. And I remember in the 70s, we were the first one in Europe starting Christian rock music, 74. Who was here around in Europe in 74? Who were born? Oh, only a few. Okay. 74. In those days, the majority of the Christians thought that rock music was from the devil. Yeah? And here was a nice couple from Rotterdam starting up Christian rock. How the heck? They must be mad. I will never forget, we have it in the old archives, that a Christian magazine wrote on the front page, this is not from God. Hey, how would you feel? Anyway, we did it. And there have been many debates in the Christian radio, Christian television, the Christian press about rock music. We won the case, and rock music is just as normal as Mr. Bach, and I like Bach, by the way. So, when you are innovating, be prepared that things can hurt you. So don't lose your vulnerability and your authenticity, I may say. So somewhere you have to be open, and somewhere else you must have a defense. Yeah, that is at least what we learned. Am I saying it correct, Mr. Geoffrey? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we move to the next part. Geoffrey, we want to thank you. He gets a little present to remember us. Well, because you are Brexit. Yeah. Okay, Jill, come on. Zeger, the chairs. And the mics. Give you the mics. Ja. Oké. Wacht even tot ze klaar is dan. Ja hoor. Nou, nee. Ik moet even één afkondigen.
Good. Does that feel better? Okay, have a seat. Etienne, if you can come up as well.
Etienne.
Etienne.
There is one short announcement. Ellie. Oh, yeah. Stand up.
It's about a talent evaluation. It will happen every afternoon at the opposite of this place. At no, 1:30. 1:30. 1:30. And I need the following participants: Heidi Salvedo. Okay, I meet you afterward. And Salome Killenbach. Okay, I meet you later there. And teachers, musicians, and public is welcome over there.
Thank you very much. Okay. Well, please have a seat, Etienne. We move now to the interview. So we're going to have 3 artists come and share their experience and their knowledge and their insights with us just before we have coffee. And so there'll be an opportunity to hear and also to do a small Q&A after each artist has spoken. So do have some questions ready if there's a particular artist that you think, yeah, I'm responding to that journey and that story. So it's my privilege to introduce Etienne Volery from Switzerland. And Etienne, this is your second time at Christian Artists, yes?
Yes.
Welcome. This is fantastic. And you're an artist, but you're an artist who practices in a number of different areas. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. So could you perhaps just tell us where you started your journey as an artist?
Yeah, I started as an architect for landscape designing. And I study in an engineering school architectures, and I took a few years in different desks, and it was not so creative as I thought, so I decided to switch and start into art, and I started with jewelry, making rings for men, because we can find a lot of things for women, but for men it's not so common. And then I started to paint, and then sculptures and some land art. And now I started my company 15 years ago, and I keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and so how many years in total have you been active as an artist?
It was 17 years ago, I think.
Okay, 17 years ago. But it sounds like you've had different seasons for different art forms, shall we say. So could you just say how you moved from one season to another and why?
Yeah. So from architect to artist, I started to build my company. I stayed 50% as an architect, and the 50% other, I started the company.
Okay.
So when I came back from a world tour of my honeymoon, it was 2 years, I had no money, nothing. I had to start again, so I said, okay, don't start like this from the beginning, it will be dangerous. Start to make 50% architect, and then I gave me 1 year, and after this 1 year, I started my first exhibitions in painting, and my boss said, yeah, continue in painting, that's a good way. So, and I quit off my job, and then I was directly 100% the artist.
Okay, okay. So, and you were able to make a living, were you, as being 100% artist?
Yes.
Yes, you were. Okay, were there challenges that went with that, though, for you?
If the finance is a challenge? At the 2 first years, yes. But after then, no.
Okay, and that was when you were being an artist and not a jewelry maker, is that right?
As jewelry maker, at the beginning I had not the money from the jewelry because I always start to build, create new things that nobody did before. So I try to find a new way of creation.
Yes.
So jewelry, it started to be a business after 5-6 years. So the first business was the painting.
Ah, okay, okay.
They were sold real quickly.
Yes. All right, but you needed to supplement that with the jewelry.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay. That's probably quite helpful for people to hear that you needed to diversify in your artistic area to continue to live.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But after I had different string on my bow.
Yes.
And then I can also give the art courses.
Yes.
So it's income regular.
Okay.
And jewelry, it's a half of the year because I don't want to make only this.
Okay.
And the rest is the painting art pieces, and I never know if the gallery will sell it or not. It's
okay.
It's a kind of lottery.
Yeah.
You never know.
So you almost have a yearly cycle of when you do particular things. Is that right? So making your jewelry. When do you make your jewelry?
From February to start of June.
Okay.
I only do wedding rings.
Okay.
Because of all the weddings are in summer. And now I start the period of creating painting and sculpture.
Okay. Oh, that's quite nice. So, nice to have a varied year where you do different things, but it also works for your income as well.
Yeah.
Which is really positive. And tell us a little bit about the company, because you mentioned to me the other day that you had this company, but you were releasing the responsibility of that because it involved too much management, so that you could actually become more creative in your other areas. But could you tell us just what that company was, and just so people can hear a little bit of the challenges that lay there for you, which is why you had to put them down?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the same time as an independent artist, 7 years ago I started to build an association to connect Christian artists from the French part of Switzerland and France. And then it became more and more important. And this, I took a decision this last 3 months that I understand that I had to get out as a position as a president, and that it's become too big that I cannot manage it. My gift are for creating things and show the beauty of God, and not managing 20 people on a desk. No, I started to die, and I think it's good to get out and the things continue with other people that can do this better than me and quicker.
Yeah.
And this 50% of time I gave, now it's time to take it back and give it again to my family, my wife, because I was a lot of time out.
So it's taken up a lot of your time.
Yeah.
But good that you sort of recognised where you were at personally. You were able to release that to other people who you felt could do it better than you, and you could feel relaxed in that, and you're still associated with the business. Is that right?
Yeah, the association artists, as it's called, is to connecting the artists, and we give them courses to rebuild themselves, to get equipment, and to work with God as the boss.
Okay.
And yeah, we have many different ways of work with artists in the Artist Association. It's still in work, in process.
Yes.
But I think it's really a vision of God.
Yeah. So that's exciting. So that's a group of people that you still continue to connect with. But as an artist, you're also connecting with people through teaching and workshops. And is that a place of learning for you, as well as teaching?
Oh yeah, because when I give my art courses to students in the evening, I learn a lot from them.
Yeah.
Also, it's not even to give techniques, but how they paint and the questions they have. It keeps me going on, and for myself, I keep taking courses to develop new techniques, and for them it's also something a new brief for me too, and it's like an exchange very good for me. Yeah,
it's a good exchange. Good.
Yeah.
Well, slightly random question, but it's just popped into my mind. What is the most exciting thing that you've actually created recently? What do you feel like is something really good that you've been really pleased with?
Two things. It's in sculpture with the stones.
Okay.
Now I'm sick. I always, when I find a nice stones, I pick it up.
Yeah.
And my wife said, "Oh no, one stone more in the house." And I have so much. And from the last year with Mariska, I learned to carving stones, and I love it.
Yeah.
And just a few weeks ago, I learned to ink cupboard.
Okay.
It's a thick paper.
Yeah.
And I ink them to make a monotype for pressing.
Okay.
And the result is amazing. So I will work on this more.
Okay, so some exciting things are coming out of all the things that you're learning. So if you were going to give some advice for people who perhaps were looking to be a full-time artist, but obviously need the reality of bread and butter before them and getting an income, what would you say are the things that couple of things that you've really learned along the way that have helped you?
Yeah, the most important, I think, is to really trust God and let Him everything, and not to think about the financial way.
Okay.
When I had some like a mentor, someone who helped me at the beginning. He said, "Okay, but take 2 minutes to pray every week for your work." I said, "Okay." And then she said, "Take 1 hour in the week," and then it started to be more and more. And now I always have in my timetable the Monday morning. It's blocked. It's got right in meeting with God. I take no other appointment. And then I have from 8 to 12. I'm just with Him in my car, and I pray or I listen. Sometimes I have nothing. Sometimes I have to write many pages in the book.
Yeah.
And I always think a journey is like, for me, a week. So every week is a new one.
Okay.
And then the Monday morning, I plan all the week in this morning.
Okay.
And then I know which I have to call in this date.
Yes.
And where I have to go. And yeah.
Fantastic. So
and
you begin
this way, it works.
Yeah, you begin your week with God.
It's sustainable. Yeah, really.
Yeah, fantastic. That's really helpful. And is there anything else that you would perhaps leave as another piece of advice that you could give? Just maybe a practical advice?
So I don't know right now. I think what is important well, the fact is to find your artistic language. The moment you find your artistic language, this is unique in everybody. It's like your ADN code.
Yeah, DNA.
Yeah.
DNA. Yeah.
DNA code. The moment you find these languages, then you break all the walls.
Yeah.
A gallery, a good gallerist, he see the work, he doesn't need to speak. He say, okay, I take your work and I help you.
Yeah.
But to find this way, it's by working, always working, take hours on the work, and having a person who has experience and be open-minded about all the things he can see and help to get better. And often, the way after you create something, it's usually, often it's un lien, comment on dit un lien? A link to your past, to your childhood, when your child time is very small.
Okay.
I think God, He wants to start from the beginning, like the birth, and then you grow slowly more, step by step. And it's like a maturity that you start again like a baby in art, and then you become adults, and you can go through the sea. I always say, after we say a project is the same roots in Latin than a problem. So if God gives you a problem to resolve, you know that you have the answer, and the problem, you will pass it, you will success it. And always I have the thinking is this sentence, in English is I find the word.
Say the word, someone else will.
Une mer calme. A calm sea, never made good sailors. Calm waters.
Calm seas will never make good sailors because you're not
Yeah.
You're not riding the tide.
After when come the waves, and you have to where I put my
where you put your boat, it needs to be in choppy waters.
Yes.
Yeah, where you learn.
And every time you get the wave, then you have to again.
You dive in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. So some spiritual advice there that you've given us, but also that whole journey of finding your artistic voice is something that you think is just so key and so important. Yes?
It's to have a regular time of work.
Yes.
I know it's difficult because also as I have a family and I have to take time with the children and my wife, but to have a regular timetable, it's very important.
Yeah. Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Etienne, thank you so much. And we know we're going to see some of your work. Is it tomorrow night?
No, it's Thursday.
Tuesday night.
I start to make it.
Tuesday night.
The 1st August.
Yeah,
evening,
okay.
From the last night.
Okay, so we're going to look forward to seeing a range of your projects, which will be fantastic. We've got time for just perhaps 2 questions, 1 or 2 questions. If any of you want to ask Etienne anything or you want to pick up on anything he said, please raise your hand if you would like to ask him anything. Oh, we have one over there. Do we have a person who can run around? Yes, please. Thank you. You give him that one and I'll give you this. Yeah.
Right, okay. Who was it again? There, back there. Come to you, I'll hold it for you.
Yeah, what you're saying about having periods in the year for making different types of works is very inspiring. Is it like in the period of printmaking you don't do paintings, or does it still kind of combines, or is it just really you focus on one thing? How do you do that?
Actually, I do many things in the same time. So I can have the pottery, it's not cleaned, and in the press I still have the paper inside it, and then I curve the wood nearby. It's a bit like a mess, but in this mess I can find my way. I do by the feeling in the morning. Yeah.
But then in this time, because wedding rings is a very where you have clients that expect something from you. So in a period of, say, painting, you don't accept any work from clients then?
In paintings?
No, in wedding rings, the very, like...
Um, No, I just take the order. So they come in the studio and we decided, I designed the rings. And then I said to them, they ask me when they will receive the rings. And I say, between 3 and 6 months. And they look at me like that. Say, yeah, but I have other people and I only do the rings when I have a quiet time. I cannot do the rings when I'm stressed. It doesn't work. So the time of doing rings, it's stressing a little bit for me because I give me a lot of time, but it takes me so much time to do them that it's always full. And then for the winter time, I put this back and I'm more free to paint. Otherwise, I cannot paint and doing rings. This doesn't work. I have to stop the rings and then I can paint and sculpture.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Yeah.
That helps.
Thank you.
Etienne, thank you very much. Please give a hand to Etienne. Thank you. Thank you. Well, our next artist is Jonathan Romppel from Germany. Jonathan, if you'd like to come up. Let's give Jonathan a hand. Encouragement. Hey. Hi, Jonathan. Welcome. Come have a seat. Hey. So, Jonathan, you're one of our younger members at CA, and yesterday I found out you felt you're pretty much born here because you've been coming since the age of about 2. Is that right?
I think so. I actually don't remember how old I was when I came the first time. So
I think you're a Christian artist baby. That's what you are. Yeah. So that's great. You grew up here, so this is very much your family, which is lovely. And although you probably don't think you have had many years' experience yet, I'm sure you've got a few things of interest to share for all of us, actually, not just the younger members here at CA, but for all of us. So could you tell us, Jonathan, what is your main artistic art form? And where are you at in your journey at the moment?
well, I'm making music, and right now I'm mostly performing. Okay. I've always played with the idea of composing and producing, and I'm like doing some on the side, but right now I'm performing. That's my main thing. Yeah.
Okay, but you're also in a season of study, aren't you?
Yeah.
Can you tell us where you're studying?
At Berklee College of Music in Boston.
Okay.
And I just finished my second year.
Okay, and what exactly are you studying there? What are the details?
My program is called Contemporary Writing and Production. Mm-hmm. So, well, for school, I'm learning how to arrange and how to produce. But at the same time, well, that's just classes. That's one thing of music school. And then what I would say is the bigger thing at music school is the outside projects and the performing and working with other students.
Great. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the projects that you're involved in?
It's mostly playing shows. So for artists, for singers and singer-songwriters when they get bands together. Okay. Or productions at Berklee.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. And why did you choose Berklee in particular? Why that school?
Well, I've always wanted to go to the US.
Okay.
And it just kind of seemed like the best bet for popular music, because everything else is kind of centered on classical and jazz. And that's like the best place for soul, R&B, gospel, also jazz and pop, rock, all that.
Did you have some help and guidance as you chose that school? Because I expect there are quite a lot of people here who just think, well, how do you actually make that decision to go to a particular university or college? What are the things that draw you to that place? And what advice did you seek for that? Or not?
Not really a
Maybe
lot.
just advice from above?
Yeah, I just kind of, well, I'd heard, actually, yes, I'd heard that name a lot. Like
Yes.
people have been, when like the time came around that I was finishing school,
Okay.
I had to decide where to go. A lot of people mentioned it to me.
Okay.
So I thought that maybe that was a hint.
Yeah.
So I kind of just started looking into it
Yeah.
and then went from there.
Okay. So as an international student, do you have particular challenges working out in the States with funding or just with visa, with the process? Is there any challenge from moving from your own country and studying somewhere else?
Well, the school makes it really easy, like the whole
Okay.
process. So, like
You-
they make sure we have a student visa and
Yeah.
everything's updated and we can enter the States again. One challenge is that international students on a student visa aren't allowed to work officially, which is particularly hard in the music business. So you're not officially allowed to do outside gigs outside of
Okay.
school.
Okay, but you kind of get around that by offering your services for free?
Perhaps.
Perhaps.
There might have been people who do that.
Yeah. Okay. And is it more expensive to study there? And do you get a scholarship to be there?
Yes, Berkeley is offering a lot of scholarships.
Okay.
So once you audition for the school, you're also going to consideration for scholarships.
Okay.
Yeah, but again, there are also a lot of outside scholarship options, but only for U.S. domestic students.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just really helpful, I think, to hear, because if you are thinking of studying outside of, say, your home country, just need to know, people need to hear what some of these issues might be. And I think funding is often an issue. You can't always get funding if you move outside of your home country. That's great. And so any exciting projects coming up for the future for you, Jonathan, or working with particular artists?
Well, I've played in one big production last semester, which was a Disney tribute show. And
Fantastic.
there's probably going to be another one of those,
Okay.
continuation. And I hope that leads to more projects.
Yeah.
So it's really just hoping that one thing leads to
Leads to
another, you
another.
know, being seen and getting recommended, all
Okay.
that.
So you're definitely in a season of pushing out, getting to know people, giving yourself
Yeah.
to many things to see where you're best placed and building up your network of people, really.
Yeah, exactly. That's like
Yeah.
the two main things that I try to do. I try to say
Yeah.
yes to almost everything,
Yeah.
take all the options,
Okay.
and get to know as many people as possible, because you never know who's gonna get you the next gig, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you. And you've got one more year to do at Berkeley, yes? And then what do you think it's going to look like in the future, or where would you like to be post your studies?
Well, right now I'm looking at, because that's like the two big music cities in the US, either Los Angeles or New York. And I know both of those have big alumni networks from Berkeley.
Okay.
So that's what I'm looking at.
Yeah, okay, so you've situated yourself deliberately in the States with a view to working further
Well,
with
for
others.
the near future, yeah.
Yeah.
Then there's
Yeah.
also the problem that after you graduate as an international student, you have 1 year to work in the States, and then you can apply for a visa.
Yeah, okay.
So that's pretty open.
Yeah, okay, so you're just going to have to see what happens
Yeah,
after
exactly.
that. That's really great, thank you. So because you're not at a stage where you're particularly earning an income or that, but you're at those first early stages of thinking that through and beginning to network, I can't really ask you any advice for those who are thinking of moving in similar circles. But if there was anything you wanted to share about your journey to date or your experience, what would you say to people who perhaps a similar age to you or just thinking about stepping into further education as a musician, perhaps? Is there anything that you would just say, this was really a key piece of advice that I had, or this was really helpful for me?
Well, the most important thing is not to be the best player all the time, but to be a nice person and to get
Okay.
to know people.
Okay.
And I would say that's even the main reason you go to music school. It's not
Okay.
to learn things, but to meet people, to get a network
Yeah.
of people, of friends that
Yeah.
know you and will recommend you. Because that's really how you get gigs
Yeah.
in the music business.
Yeah.
You're not being seen, and then
Yeah.
someone's calling you. Your friend's gonna recommend you. You know.
Yeah. So the relational dimension of it all is
Yeah.
absolutely key and worthy of great investment by the sounds of it. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you, Jonathan. Let's give Jonathan a hand. Thank you. Just wait there a minute. Just if there's a question. Does anyone have a question for Jonathan about where he's at in his journey or anything you want further clarification on? Any questions? Oh, we have. Okay. You do that.
Where was that? Somewhere around here? Yes. Okay, I'll hold it for you.
Hi, Jonathan. I don't know you that much, but I did see that you played the piano yesterday together with this girl performing. So, is this your main instrument, or do you play other instruments? Because you didn't give much detail in that respect yet.
Yeah, piano and keyboards is my main instrument, and well, I've tried a few others, but right now I'm like settled on keys. Yeah.
And singing as well. Singing as well.
I've done some backgrounds before, but it's not my focus.
Okay, here at the back. Oh, translation again? Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to congratulate you first.
Thank you.
I know that you're a very great pianist and you have a great future. So congratulations. Question? What's your greatest dream? What do you want to accomplish in your future that has pushed you to go and study in the US? So what's the dream that made you go to the US?
I'm not sure I have a specific answer for that. It's really just being able to work and make a living from playing music and playing piano. Well, I've had a few dreams, like playing in the band for Stevie Wonder's live tour. But the more time I spend at Berkeley, the younger I realize, like, the more I realize how young, like, all the people are that I'm working with, and the more I'm drawn to, like, oh, that sounds bad. Well, let's just say I'm getting more realistic. I just hope I can survive playing music.
Thank you, Jonathan. I think we're going to have to move on because coffee is going to be calling soon. So we've got one more person to interview, but let's give a hand to Jonathan. Thank you. Well, our third guest is Paul Lorenger from the United States. So let's give Paul a hand as well for encouragement. Hey, Paul, welcome. Come and have a seat. Can we have another mic? Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. And we really enjoyed seeing some of your work last night, so it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
And I believe there's a 40th anniversary about to happen in your life.
Yes, it's a little bit deceptive, but because I took individual years off by mistake or by design, but next month I will have been a professional dancer for 40 years.
That's amazing. I think that's worthy of an applause. Wow, well done. Well done.
Thank you.
Well done, good and faithful servant, as they say. So, many years' experience, moving from Jonathan to Paul. Little brain switch again. But, so, born and raised in the States, yes? And so, you've been training and working primarily in the States, is that right?
No.
Okay.
When I was only training, I was training in the States.
Yeah.
I worked a year each in 4 different dance companies there.
Okay.
And then I moved to Europe.
Aha.
So, yeah, when it came to mainly working, it's been Europe.
Okay, which is really great for us to hear that because, yeah, 2 different kind of contexts that you're straddling. So, how did it all begin? How did you start as a dancer?
Well, to try to tell this very quickly, I come from a sort of academically oriented family. Okay. And my parents had us 4 children all reading at college level by the time we were 13 or something. And it was a surprise for my parents that I didn't become a doctor or something. I had a friend who played drums. I became interested in that, started doing that. So rock and roll was sort of my first love. I don't know if I really got to the point of playing instead of just banging, but at some point I got recruited into a high school play, and they wanted you to sing and dance and act. And it went on from there. I had a bit of talent, and I just tried to develop it. And at some point, I gave up drums because I thought I just couldn't do both.
Okay. Okay, that's interesting though, from drums to dance. Okay. And can you say how you ended up, so you did most of your training in the States. How did you end up being in a European context and getting most of your work there, really?
Connections. And I mean, God just must have been working in that. So I don't want to like talk about it in terms of things you could concretely say, do this, do this, do that. But the connection was, in this case, I had a dance teacher in the Washington, D.C. area who had worked in Holland, and he set me up with a job in Amsterdam.
Okay. And what helped you sort of decide to stay across in the European context then? Was it just the work, or was it some aspect of the culture, or what
Well, it's been different things. I've been over here, speaking of anniversaries, I just passed the 35-year mark. So there were times when I thought, okay, what I can do as a dancer is better oriented towards what they're doing in Europe. There were other times when it just seemed like, okay, I have work here, even if it's not in dance. Okay. And so do I want to abandon that and go back to live in the States? There's also a sort of repulsion factor. I come from Detroit, and we invented or we promoted the car-oriented American lifestyle, where everyone tends to have their own house, and they're a little tiny bit of land around it, and then the distances get bigger because there's so much space anyways. And then you get stuck with having a car, and you have really spread out cities and this kind of thing. I dislike that. So I'm better suited over here.
Yeah, that's great. So you've already alluded to the fact that there has been other work that you've had to do as well as being a professional dancer. Can you say how you've been able to sustain yourself as a dancer?
Well, there were phases of that too. There was a point when I had been working with a missionary organization, tried to start a dance company there. That failed. It was outside of Germany, although I had been living in Germany. So I moved back to Germany after that, and was sort of in limbo for a little while. That's when we did our Flying Mammals project. That part of that happened then. But at some point, I basically begged the authorities, look, do you see what this is doing to my marriage, to not be able to make money? And here I am. You're letting me live here temporarily, but you're not letting me deliver pizza. So they eventually gave me a visa which was not specifically just for the specialized area of dance, working as an employee. And so I started having the opportunity to do other things and slowly built up my great personal fortune, which I don't have. I don't have much of a retirement plan, but I might add that I've been able to save some money, and that is helpful.
Okay, so you basically have been able to supplement your income through other kind of work, which has been sort of, what kind of other work have you been able to do?
Well, supplement is kind of an interesting, nice term. Sometimes I spend most of the year doing other work. I mean, you saw the dance work I'm doing, and for me it's interesting, and I'm working in interesting houses in different countries, cities, working with an interesting director who gets a lot of work, and he's controversial, and there are a lot of interesting things. But in the last 12 months, I worked 4.5 months in a row as a dancer, which is something I hadn't done for maybe 20 years. I don't know. So I've just sort of lucked onto things. Again, I believe in God's leading, but I have 2 other professional areas that I'm working in. One is manual labor, and particularly backstage work. So I've been a stagehand now. That's changing. I was working with a rigging company, so like lifting heavy stuff. The benefit being you're using your body. I'm doing something else now that involves climbing up and down ladders and fixing things on walls. So it's physical again. I'm also a proofreader. I've done some editing. So I've learned actually a couple things from this. One is that, okay, I have a physical art form, so if I'm doing a day job or a making money job, it helps to be using my body. I go crazy sitting behind a desk too much. Still, at the same time, when I was a proofreader, I'm not doing that so much now, but most of my proofreading has been, as it turns out, annual reports for large corporations. It's just because I have a picky brain, I look at details and I want to fix them. So that makes a good proofreader, I guess. And one thing I learned from this is that if you want to make money, go where the money is. So, I mean, a large corporation has money. And another thing I learned is if you can find jobs that you want to do or like to do and that no one else likes to or wants to or can, that pays more. So I didn't figure this out in advance, but I've learned it by doing it.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. And what does any future plans you have of the perhaps the next year that could be quite interesting for us to hear about? Any projects that you've got coming up?
Well, I often find big blanks in my life. I don't know what's happening artistically after about the middle of October. I've got a revival of an opera that we're doing in Berlin. And so with the same director, with Klaus Guth, whose work you saw yesterday, a bit of. It's a different kind of style. He still focuses on the psychological aspects of this particular story, but does so using sort of artificial figures which are presented using masks. So I have this huge mask I have to navigate with.
Okay.
Then, in general, I'm trying to figure out the right balance of various things in my life. I've mentioned to you that I do volunteer sort of relief work in Eastern Europe, and just trying to get that under control, because if you have people who need something, they're always going to need more. And also to find the right way to do that, so that you, if you're helping people, that you help them to become sort of healthily independent rather than dependent on you. As I try to tone that down or just keep it in the right perspective, I'm looking at a couple other things, trying to make more time for my art, and also I have a long-term project I haven't told you about. I bought, 16 years ago, I bought an old schoolhouse in a French tiny village down in the south, and I thought, okay, it's got a classroom, this has potential, I'll make my studio in there, and I'm just trying to somehow make that thing move toward whatever it should be.
Okay, exciting project. Yeah, thank you, Paul. Well, it is nearly coffee time, but we've got a bit of an idea of your journey and some really helpful advice there about working life as well. So thank you for that. Are there any questions for Paul? We can have 2 questions before coffee. So maybe something that he said that you just want to know a little bit more about or tap into. Yes. Okay. One question over.
You read? Yeah.
You said you have been proofreading for companies, and while you're from a total different profession, of course, how did you get the companies? How did you convince the companies that you are the right proofreader for them?
I didn't. I have an acquaintance from church who is a professional translator, and he had started working with, or this might have been the first year that he was doing this work for this particular bank through an agency. He knew that they had a deadline, this company had a deadline, this bank, and thought they weren't going to hit it. He was right, so he forewarned me and said, hey, Paul, do you have a little time to come in and do this? So again, it's just sort of the good fortune and the blessing of God also helping me realize that I have this talent, or this, yeah, it's a talent. It's something you have to develop, and I have not been using it much lately, I must admit, although I'm trying. But that's what it was. I didn't look for much work. I often don't look for much work, which is, it can be a disadvantage because then you sort of get stuck in the thing you're doing and you don't move on.
Coffee time. Paul, thank you. Let's give a hand to Paul. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Great. Well done.
Okay, coffee break. Please be back in 20 minutes.